Hello, folks. Welcome to my show, Coffee with Marx. This is your celebrity host, Karl Marx, tuning in from the afterlife. Today, we'll have some of my esteemed guests joining us over a cup of coffee, so let's get started. I said money alienated the essence of man's work and existence, and that this essence enslaves man and he worships it. Is it not true in this capitalistic society of yours, something that you apparently are so proud of? Is it not true that the divide between the social classes has widened? Is it not true that man is the most efficient he has ever been, and yet he is lonely and searches for meaning? Is it not true that capitalism has hollowed the society that you live in today? I guess I was right all along.
You know, they all don't call me the father of economics and capitalism for no reason. And you question why I support capitalism, Marx? I was born during the Industrial Revolution, and I'm very proud of how far we have come from there. And if capitalism is a fruit, so be it. You are constantly concerned about the meaning of labor, power, and classes. It was never so complicated during our times. It melted my heart when you advocated the labor theory of value that said the value of a commodity was determined by the average number of labor hours necessary to produce it. Wasn't that simplistic for you? But very soon the theory was so subjective. You concluded the wages of a worker should be directly proportional to the labor power of a worker. And this whole concept of labor power left you wondering about the distribution of surplus in a capitalistic society. I just wish times were simpler.
Smith, you see, I took the labor theory from you, who the world shall call classicals. We agreed on the labor theory, but it was your followers that could not digest the alignment of thought. Your followers left your side and called themselves the neoclassicals and developed something called the utility theory to value goods and services. I think they probably did it for their own selfish reasons. Do not forget that your followers deserted you, and had they accepted our labor theory, the world would have been different. As you say, times might have been simpler, and maybe the proletariat would have broken free from its chains.
It is not from the benevolence of a butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from the regard to their own self interest. So, at each point, if each of us are able to produce something to meet each other's needs, trade, and contribute to the division of labor, we are just getting richer and better off. Is that not sufficient enough for you? I wonder when the study of economics moved beyond the wealth of nations. There is no way you're getting out of this system.
Smith, I think you've said enough. I think you're nothing more than a big blind spot. Technology has moved fast enough to fulfill everyone's needs. Even with unemployed labor, corporations are getting bigger and bigger. Needs are being fulfilled. It's not about fulfilling the overall need, it's about fulfilling the capitalist greed. Maybe it's time, maybe it's time we start the revolution.
Talking about the value theory, labor power or the time devoted is not the only determinant of the final market value of a commodity. In the contemporary world, the prevalence of technology must also be accounted for. This clearly shows that Mr. Karl Marx's labor theory is based ultimately upon a moral theory, the doctrine that human suffering and a human lifetime spent are fundamentally different from all natural processes. Speaking of the methodological standpoint, Marxism is a pure historical prophecy or a pseudoscience as it predicts the process of capitalism to socialism through a vision of history. This therefore implies that there is no theoretical justification for the social change that Marxism envisions because such a change cannot ultimately be controlled scientifically. I believe that a test of scientific theory is not whether it can be verified, but it is open to being falsified by experience. That is, a theory is scientific only if it fits the facts and can be proved wrong. Therefore, Marxism is not a scientific theory as you claim it is, since it cannot be falsified. When it was tried to be falsified, your supporters shifted the ground to protect your theory. Speaking of the process itself, Marxists indeed assert that capitalism will sooner or later be succeeded by socialism and then communalism. I think that it is impossible to predict the uncertain future for reasons stated before. Mr. Karl Marx, you're a staunch advocate of freedom and democracy. Still, if I had to predict the outcomes of what would happen if the scientific socialism were adhered to, it would lead to totalitarianism, contrary to your own best intentions. Lenin staunchly followed the theory, and the rest is history.
Well, hello folks. Emmanuel Kant tuning in. Unlike my brother Marx, when it comes to freedom and democracy, I believe in the superiority of goodwill over nature.
Such goodwill corresponds to the impotence, depression, and wretchedness of German burghers, whose petty interests were never capable of developing into national interests of a class.
I look at contractual relations as the foundation of any state, whereas you deride them as concealed forms of social coercion. Here are my argument. A skill cannot be developed in the human race without the presence of inequality and the division of labor. Simply put, that when the great majority provides the necessities of the life for the convenience and leisure of others who work at the less necessary elements like culture, science, and art. And this process of the immediate satisfaction of needs of a particular minority leads to social tension because needs multiply, they are never ending. And this tension between those who work and those who exploit the products of their work, it's very conducive to further external violence and increased discontent. Well, political institutions are extremely essential in this context because they create a platform where humans can, reciprocally resolve their arguments, and it subordinates the needs and interests of human beings, of individual human beings, to grow more towards general patterns of human cooperation. And coming back to my favorite maxim, act only on that maxims through which you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. Simplifying this jargon, it simply means that any action that you take should be easily generalizable as a universal action, which means that if you are doing it, anybody should be able to do it. So, talking of a proletariat revolution in the context of this maxim, the means of a revolution will always be wrong, and when the means are wrong, then revolution in itself cannot be right.
Can't I think you know that I disagree with you? Since the ends of revolution are right, then the revolution cannot be wrong. Let the ruling classes tremble at a communistic revolution.
The Communist Manifesto is a fiery political text written by my comrade Marx and myself Engels in 1848. It is significant for at least two reasons. First, the ideas it espouses have had a major impact on real world developments, inspiring political leaders and social revolutionaries across the globe from the mid 1800s till today. Second, it was one of the first political texts to focus squarely on economic exploitation and inequality. Its insights into how capitalism might create and perpetuate these problems are as relevant today as they were in the 1800s. Marx and I have wanted to do more than just explain the social world. We've wanted to intervene in it, challenge it, transform the existing power relations, and change the world for the better. The manifesto has provided an entirely new theory of social relations and social progress, the theory of historical materialism, which posits that since ancient times, societies have been divided into opposing classes that exist in perpetual conflict with one another. The conflict between the classes, between the oppressors and the oppressed, drives history relentlessly towards its ultimate destination. A social system finally liberated from exploitation and class conflict, and the destination is communism. The theory holds that throughout history, control over the means of production, from land and raw materials to tools, technology, and human knowledge, has been a highly unequal affair in every mode of production, from ancient times of slavery to feudalism and then to capitalism. Some social classes have controlled the means of production, and others have been forced into positions of subordination and exploitation. The manifesto offers a scientific theory of historical development to identify a set of general laws that underpin social dynamics and evolution. In my view, the theory of historical materialism takes a very special view of history. In this view, I see the final cause and spirit behind historical events. Both Marx and I have stressed on the scientific nature of our views of history. In the German ideology, for example, we have asserted that our views of history are based on observation and an exact description of actual conditions. In keeping with the scientific theme, the manifesto also identified a set of conditions and contradictions within capitalism that will ensure its inevitable demise. For example, it argues that capitalism has simplified class antagonisms and split society into two great and hostile camps: the bourgeoisie, who privately own the means of production, and the proletariat, who must sell their labor for a wage to survive. Moreover, the wages paid to workers are always less than the value of the goods they produce. Now, this is the great exploitation that sits at the heart of capitalism. The profits that the capitalists enjoy come from extracting the surplus value created by workers. Technological advancements, including the use of machines in production, further drives wages down and displaces labor, driving the working class into poverty. Finally, an ever increasing productive capacity combined with falling wages and employment leads to overproduction and underconsumption. So, therefore, as capitalism develops, you get a smaller and smaller, richer and richer capitalist class and a bigger and bigger, poorer and poorer working class. So, in the conditions exactly right for conflict and revolution. Marx and me clearly believe that under capitalism, the capitalist class holds economic power, which translates into political power, including control of the state. But if that was the end of our story, there would have been little point in writing a book like the Communist Manifesto or in calling for the workers of the world to unite. Under capitalism, the key dynamic shaping social order is the capitalist ownership of the means of production and their relentless pursuit of profit only through the exploitation of wage labor. When class consciousness becomes possible, workers realize that they are being exploited. Therefore, we aim to unify class workers and encourage them to go on strikes and demand a better pay by building their economic power. Now, with that economic power, the working class can shape ideas and political outcomes. I say that change is possible. Bring on the revolution and create a just society.